Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna P. Santos, and thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have, on a rare occasion, our sit-down with the women behind Rappler. These women are usually used to asking the questions, but we now have them to answer ours. Let me introduce to you this evening our CEO, Maria Reza, and our documentary producer, Patricia Evangelista, our multimedia reporter, Natasha Gutierrez, and our desk editor, Gigi Go. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Now, we're here to talk about the year in moods. We just stepped into the month of December, and looking back at 2013, we started off on a high, then kind of dwindled a little bit, and now we're here in December with Hyan. Let me ask you ladies, what would your mood meter read? Maria, do you want to start?
Oh God, it's afraid. It's
Afraid.
It was a great start to the year,
Right.
with a high GDP, and then we had elections. And in the month of May, the mood navigator, the mood meter, read 77% happy for the entire month of May. But then you've had tragedies come through. The last 3 months have been very difficult, and now we're in a place where Yolanda threatens. It's not just the physical disaster
Yes.
that's left and the impact on the people, but then the impact on our GDP moving forward. What does that mean? And we're smack in between so many things. Plus, of course, the whole super typhoon. We're unprepared for it. What does that mean? What do we do next? Are we ready for the next one?
So we started off on that high, and then we're moving to your mood meter would read afraid. Gigi?
Related to inspired, but we don't have a hopeful mood meter. But
Yeah.
inspired only because you know that people are very demanding now of government and of the media. They really want to see things work right. That's
You see that as a glimmer of hope for, that demand for accountability?
Yes, there will always be faults, there will always be shortcomings,
Yeah.
but people being more vocal about it and not just criticizing but offering alternatives, what can be done. That's a big difference from just a few years back.
I'm going to ask now Patricia and Natasha. As the journalists on the ground covering these issues, Patricia, you're just back from Tacloban.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what would your mood meter read?
Mine, I don't know if my mood meter is really my mood meter because I've been there, so most of us reflect the mood of the place. So Tacloban was bad. It was the worst I've seen. So people are angry, people are defiant, people are hopeful. I don't think people are hopeful. I don't think there's much truth in saying Tacloban is rising or Samar is rising. I think people are just trying. So if you ask me how I feel, I'm just going to say I feel pretty guilty that we're not doing enough. And I don't know who we is. I mean, it's so bad there. It's pretty good here. So I'm guilty, I guess.
I'm going to push you a little bit, Patricia. What is enough? Is that also part of what we need to answer?
Yes, definitely. And there's never going to be enough for these places. I mean, sure, they might not be hungry now, but can you imagine living in a place where maybe the body on the tree in front of you might be your wife, might not be your wife, that sort of thing. So there's never going to be enough for that place. And I hope that people understand that it's not going to be over for a very long time.
Natasha, I'll shift over to you. Let's talk about your mood meter.
I'm annoyed. I'm definitely annoyed. I think when we started the year, the big coverage was the elections. I was on the ground for that. Obviously there were points when I was annoyed, but that wasn't my main mood during the elections. I actually thought it was a relatively peaceful elections compared to past elections. So, I was pretty happy with how that turned out. That quickly turned, especially with the Napolis pork barrel scam exploding. Right. I did several stories on that. And I think, and now with Hyan as well, after the initial reaction of, afraid and all of that, it becomes annoyance now because you're annoyed at, while Patricia was on the ground at Tacloban, I was here trying to analyze the response of the national government. So I was in Malacanang trying to understand, what the organization was doing, the relief efforts, rehabilitation, and it soon turned annoying because then you were realizing, you're saying we're not doing enough, for me personally, I was frustrated. I was annoyed at I'm not saying the lack of response, but the lack of, I feel, organization
Coordination.
and
Yeah, coordination.
until now.
You
You
don't
know,
have a ground commander there. You have people saying, oh, no, there's bury the dead, we've done everything. We haven't. So I guess, yeah, I agree with Natasha that I was on the ground, but every time I pull out and see the big picture, I cannot understand why they're saying all these things. They're not true. It's not happening, but I agree.
And that's a good compliment also between your reporting on the ground and your reporting here from Manila, bringing those two perspectives together and how they play into the big picture that is Haiyan. Now, we discussed a lot, no? Haiyan, PDAF, the elections. Which of these stories and every story in between made the most impact on you as a journalist, as a person? Patricia, you mentioned that it's kind of impossible to detach yourself sometimes from the story.
You can't. They live in your head for the longest time, and you kind of hope they don't go away, because if they do, you sort of didn't do your job. I mean, they tell you their story, and sometimes there's no electricity, there's no battery, there's no light, and people go to you, and they want to tell their story. So I pretend to be rolling videos sometimes already, only because they just want to talk. They want to tell their story, and then you come back and say, I need to find a way to tell this. So it doesn't matter if it's print, it's video, it's photo, you try to find a way, but they have the greatest faith in media there. And maybe we don't deserve it, because there's not so much we can do. It's not like we promise anything, but we can't do much either. So if the question is what story mattered the most, there was a barangay captain of Village 31. His name is Dodo.
Is this in Tacloban or Samar?
Tacloban.
Okay.
Tacloban. Village 31, population of 2,000, and he managed to evacuate everyone. I mean, or attempt to evacuate everyone. By midnight, he went home, lay down beside his wife. His wife said, no, we don't have to evacuate because it's your birthday.
Okay.
So storm comes, they rush out of the house, go down the street. The surge was coming, one wave in. So they thought, we gotta get out of the house. So they found a bigger house, a stronger house. They go up, 20 people. By the time they hit the second floor, the surge was going up. And then another wave slammed against, there's 3 waves. Another wave slammed against the house, and then the water kept climbing and climbing. So he broke open the roof. They popped out of the roof, and then it was like a raft floating. And then the third wave hit. So he jumped into a balcony, but he missed. So he went down, fought his way up, saw his wife was still okay. So he jumped to the balcony again, made it, turned around, his wife was gone. He managed to save 19 people, including himself, except for his wife. And then he went down. I mean, when the water went down, he looked down, 1.5 meters below him, his wife, under a pile of debris. Carried her body, brought him to the engineering center, laid her down on a piece of wood, and slept beside her for 2 days because he was scared he was going to lose his wife. And then he wrote a letter, and he reads it every night, and he says, I'm sorry, 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 love. What do you do to that, right? I mean, that's what the story in my head now. It could be another story tomorrow because I keep talking in my head. But for me, 2013 was Yolanda. And it should be Yolanda for the next 5-10 years. So, I don't know.
There are lots of lessons that we should learn, talking about government coordination, even about preparedness and about the humanity behind Yolanda. Huh? What about
Actually, even in the
Gigi?
newsroom, there's you could see the challenges to the desk people, the editors. On the practical side, you want to tell all of the stories, and you know you have limited people on the ground, and you cannot really report everything. And on the personal side, are you doing enough? The first few days after Yolanda, I was crying in front of my computer while just editing, processing the story, seeing all the photos. What more the reporters on the ground? What more the people who were victimized and lost their lives?
I'm glad you brought that up, Gigi, because sometimes, as reporters, as journalists, we see these things all the time. And they say there might be a chance or a danger for us to become desensitized or used to seeing these things. But Yolanda, I think, was different for all of us. There were some colleagues of ours at Rappler who were also among the affected. And I don't think any of us could see or talk about Yolanda without being very emotional about it. Natasha, what was the most impactful for you, apart from Yolanda?
Apart from Yolanda, which now seems so trivial, would probably be Napoles. I mean, that story literally changed my life. I always say I have a libel case now for articles I wrote on her daughter, and that really kind of, as your first libel case, I guess it shakes you.
You always remember the first.
Yeah, always remember the first, and I don't think I'll ever forget Janet Papoles for a while. And I thought that would be the story of the year, and Yolanda came, but it still obviously has an impact. I mean, we've seen, just unprecedented amount of, I think, people are frustrated. It was kind of the last straw. You see the Million People March, which triggered reforms.
Right.
You could see the impact of one story, of one event, and that also changed my idea of journalism, of how stories that we write can affect, has in fact a concrete outcome. And for me, it's pretty rewarding to see that the government is being forced to think about the PDAF, going all the way to the Supreme Court and having it declared unconstitutional, obviously, being forced to do reforms. I think that's pretty significant.
The policies become personal to Natasha.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
we know the hard work she has put in the stories, and we know how objective she is. And of course, she was doing it with the guidance from the editors. And then here comes the libel case. Main reason for the motive being ascribed to her is that she's envious of
Yes.
Gina policy.
That was funny.
Yeah, that was actually quite ironic, no? The justification for it was being envious. And kind of connecting envious with libelous was a bit of a
To be clear
stretch.
about it, she didn't ask for the assignment, we gave it to her.
It toughens you up, though. It really changes you. I mean, I think as a person also, not just as a journalist, but as
Yeah.
a person.
Okay.
Can I just
Yes.
add two things? Like, we talked a lot about being affected by the story,
Yes.
but you have to understand that every disaster there are casualties. I mean, every time
Yes.
we've gone through it, right? So I think as a journalist, the struggle is that you need to feel enough so that it isn't just another
Yes.
one, right?
Yes.
But if you remember Ormoc in 1991, 600 bodies buried in a mass grave.
Yeah.
10,000 people wiped out in a flash flood, and
Yes.
they were brought out to sea. I mean, so the numbers, the bodies, what we remember is what we lived through. But as a journalist, you struggle with feeling the emotions enough and yet pushing it back enough so that you can tell the story. And I think that's our constant struggle. If you pull out broader, just to pick up on what Natasha said, is empowerment. And Gigi said this and reminded us
Yeah.
of this. The corruption. I remembered a few years back, my boss for this network said, corruption is never going to be a gut issue for Filipinos. They're never going to rally for it. So don't do these types of stories. It just doesn't rate. It was a gut issue this year, and a Facebook post got 100,000 people out on the streets within 7 days.
Right.
That's kind of cool. I mean, so not to downplay Yolanda. Yolanda will define us, and it is heart-wrenching. But I also think that if you look at the entire year, it gives us a heck of a lot more to look forward to, and gives us the dilemma of what we have to handle as journalists, our own emotions, and the struggle to see a bigger picture all the time, to try to fit it in the context of where we're headed.
Actually, with the various reporting that we have, and on the platform that is Rappler, talking about how you bring in your own emotions, your own personal perspectives to your story, you can bring that out in your documentaries, in live blogging, and social media. And that is the platform that we use. And we actually are able to now get feedback as well through the mood meter. Now, that's kind of like the revolutionary thing that we have the mood meter. And I want to talk about what was the evolution in journalism that made the mood meter relevant.
You have so many. I spent most of my career. Okay, I think I was a journalist before Natasha and Patricia was born. But,
You would say.
okay. I spent the first part of my career wanting to have rational thought rule everything. But the reality is people aren't rational. They don't make rational decisions most of the time. In fact, a neuroscientist said, this is where the mood meter came from. A neuroscientist said that up to 80% of how people make decisions in their lives is based on how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I come into the Philippines in 2005. Gallup last year said that we're the most emotional country in the world. And I was handling a large network, and I was like, okay, I I do not understand this. And then I just kind of threw it up in the air. I don't understand it, so let's see how people feel. And why do news people pretend like emotions aren't important? Why don't we just acknowledge it? And with this new technology changes everything. All of a sudden, journalists can just go beyond what we were taught, which is tell the story. You can go beyond telling us a story. Technology now allows the 20-somethings to do a heck of a lot more than we did when we were 20-something. Although confusing.
Is that the age gap in journalism that we're talking about now? No.
Gap right here. But that's why the mood meter is central to Rappler. It starts from the content creation that the journalists create, and then it's amplified by social media, which brings it to crowdsourcing, which is what the mood meter is, and then all that data becomes big data, which is funneled right back to give us more insight into our society.
What have we learned from, we track the mood meter, we track moods. What have we learned about the Filipinos over the last couple of months?
This year,
yeah,
we sway between happy and angry. Constantly.
Happy and angry.
Those are the two moods that are there. Yeah.
It was also an extreme for us as a people, and basically reacting, as what you said, to the events. Gigi, I'm going to go to you. I'm not going to leave you. I know we have the same era. So we share the same, we belong to the same era. How has journalism evolved over the years since you started?
Aside from the fact that we now have laptops and they still say it. I pound on the laptops heavily because I was used to the typewriters. Yeah, you have data gathering should be easier now. That's why I really get pissed off when reporters turn in lousy stories because you don't
There's
have
no excuse.
any excuse to turn in like a manipis story. But it also puts pressure on you to produce better stories than a generation before because of all the platforms, the gadgets you have, the many ways of telling a story now.
The more demanding bosses.
But I've heard the younger journalists say they can type in a story on the phone now.
Yes.
As a digital convert, have you learned how to do that?
Recently.
Okay, all right. And I'm gonna go now to, Patricia using documentaries and Natasha as a multimedia reporter. Is that now a mandatory minimum for journalists to be able to communicate using social media, using film, using video, taking pictures? We used to travel with a crew. I mean, Maria, I used to travel with a crew.
I'm actually old school. My loyalty is to text, and it just so happened that Rappler said you need to shoot video. And then you need to shoot photos. Oh, by the way, you gotta tweet. Oh, did you see the email? You gotta do this one too and that one too. Oh, it's live streaming, by the way. I think we're compelled to. Rappler sort of demands that you're a one-stop shop. You shoot, you edit, you do everything else, and I think I'm grateful for that because I never would have turned on a camera if it weren't for Rappler demanding it. I mean, I'm used to a crew too, so like Zambo or Tacloban was difficult in the beginning because I was shooting and rolling for myself, but I think it's a good thing because various mediums can do many things, I mean, a documentary does what a text story doesn't do or that sort of thing. So, yeah, I like the openness of the mediums, but I wish the bosses didn't know we could do it.
And do it all by yourself.
Yeah,
And do it wonderfully.
No, we keep joking among ourselves. Don't tell them you can do this because they're going to tell you you're going to have to do this later. Don't volunteer
We'll
anything.
find out. We'll have a way of finding
They
out.
find out eventually, yeah.
And Natasha, you were live tweeting the Manny Pacquiao versus
Right,
Rios
right.
fight. How is that now? We're used to hearing on radio how a fight is going on or a game is going on. How is it different? How is it the same when you live tweet, when you live blog?
I think just the demands are definitely bigger because we are able to do more. But your initial question was, is it a minimum now? It may not be for hiring, but as a reporter, you want to be able to do all of these things because then you're given choices and you're empowered to do all these, to choose from so many various mediums to portray your story, right? To convey your story and to have that power, right? To be able to do that, that's great. I think it's a
that's
great
amazing.
thing. And there are certain stories that are just more powerful and print. You know, obviously sports stories will be more powerful in video.
Right.
Live tweeting sports is very different from live tweeting, you know, any other coverage. I think there are people who really want play-by-plays of sports. So I specifically think, you know, personally, tweeting very much complements sports reporting more than any other type of reporting I've done.
Like written radio.
Yes, it's
Written
like written
radio.
radio, you know, without
That
having
used to be an irony or a
Yeah.
oxymoron.
Right.
Now it's just the order of the day.
Yeah.
We've been talking about how it's been different for us or for journalists to be able to communicate, not the age group, but how it's been different for us in terms of communicating with our audience. But let's talk about the audience.
Yeah.
They now have the opportunity to feed back to us. How has that changed the paradigm of storytelling and journalism?
Well, they definitely influence the type of stories you're going to pursue, right? Because you're able to hear feedback from what people want to hear about, what they're emotional about, what affects them, and you connect with your audience. And I think that really makes your story more powerful. At the same time, you realize what people care about, you know? So it's a two-way street. It's no longer journalists telling you, this is what matters. It's a conversation. Basically, the story is a creation of not just you, but your audience. So it's definitely a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just,
It's more it's equal. It shifts
Yeah.
the balance of power.
Yeah.
I mean, before, again, if you work, the only way you could have the kind of power a large media group
Yes.
would be to belong to a large media group, i.e. you need to have a lot of money,
Yes.
you know, and then you need to be part of a hierarchy and you make those decisions. All of that's been blown away now because now social media allows you to talk back. You have as much power. A person who doesn't have a TV station has as much power as a TV station. In many instances, that's breaking that, shifting the power that way has tremendous repercussions through society. It holds power accountable in a whole different way.
Yep.
Also gives marginalized voices an equal playing field. You got to work harder at it. There's still an advantage to big media, to traditional media, but there's also an advantage to those who are the first people in this field.
In that sense, expand your editorial team. You know,
Yes.
Yes.
they are the source of story ideas. They will tell you about something you would not have heard from some far-flung town where you don't have a correspondent.
And they really tell you.
That's
They really
true.
tell you.
Yes.
And you know, it's just just a little additional work of verifying from this and that, and you have a story. And you achieve your goal of telling everybody's story as much as you can.
It's been a great equalizer, is what
Yeah.
I'm getting.
I think for me, it's because I do more human interest stories.
Yes.
I'm more on the ground. For me, the hardest part is figuring out if your craft serves it. I mean, you hear the stories, sure,
Yeah.
you understand it, you see it, but you don't know if you're serving it right, if you're doing it justice. I think that was the hardest part for disaster coverage. I hear you, but I don't know if I'm communicating it properly. Is it the proper forum? Is it disaster porn? I don't know. Because some people say, don't cover the dead, or don't cover this, or don't cover that. But now that it's online, there's social media, you sort of figure out what works and what doesn't. And if the point is to get it to people, then you find the best way to put it forward, and then they tell you if it's working or if it's not, and then you sort of tweak a bit, and then you figure out a better way to tell it. Of course, you need to grow a really thick skin. Maria will tell you I don't tweet a lot or post a lot or whatever, and I was a columnist for 10 years, so I learned not to pay attention because if you're 23 and a columnist, you're gonna cry a lot if you pay attention. But now I think I learned to grow thicker
It
skin.
teaches you to be firmer also.
Yes.
To stand
Yes.
your ground.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
definitely there
You
are
find your
people who are
voice.
just, you know,
Yeah.
discourteous and, you know, would comment harshly without clicking on the links.
Yeah.
And of course, politicians would have, or even some groups would have social media brigades, you know, just trying to bully you into,
Yeah.
because you didn't write it or report it the way they wanted you to.
Special interest groups.
Yeah.
That's also the other side of social media. We've been talking about the positive side. By all means, there are a lot. But you brought up a very interesting point about how it gives everyone a voice to say just about anything they want.
True or false.
True or false,
Without
bad
a
or not,
name, an
malicious.
address, or
Yeah.
how have you, that's something probably I think we didn't have to deal with so much. And we're all proud of our age, let's not hide that, but that's something we have to kind of deal with now. I'm going to go first to Maria and Gigi. This wasn't something we had to deal with before, feedback from different kinds. How has it been to shift to that kind of, kind of feedback from just about everyone? Now go to Patricia and Natasha, who just grew into it.
Well, it just makes you more careful. Because, well, admittedly, a lot of journalists tend to be, I know better than you do, you cannot correct me. It brings you back on the ground, and it makes you more careful. It makes you question if you are really being fair every time. It's a good thing, as long as you don't let yourself be swayed by people who do not really like sincerely or making all those comments.
Okay.
You have to have the courage to engage. I think that's a reality now. If you don't belong in media, and you cannot help craft reality. We're now transparently shaping reality together, and that's the other nice thing about it. In the past, with CNN, with ABS-CBN, you can hide as a journalist or as a manager.
Yeah.
You can hide behind the organization. In fact, most big media groups will not respond. They'll because there's always a formal response.
Yes.
Those days are over. And for me, I made that shift inside a large media organization as the head of it, because I felt that was the wave of the future. There are negatives that come with it. During the bus hostage crisis in 2009, we took our reporters who were online. They'll come right back at you, so you have to have the courage to stand your ground and have the courage to say you're wrong if you're wrong. So it's I like it. Sometimes it wastes your time. I miss the days when I could just focus on the actual work, but this is now part of the work, and it's more inclusive, and I actually think the impact in the real world is more immediate.
And they're demanding when you don't
Very
immediately
demanding.
reply.
Yeah. Demanding of us accountability as well.
We've noted this, or we're working on this. You'd be interested that some of the reporters, there are fewer times when they come to me to question whether did I get the story right. They're mostly coming to me and saying, somebody commented on my story and they felt bad, or they think I'm biased, or they're accusing me of this and that. It's not even the accuracy of the data, but do you have biases, or you didn't write it properly, or mas naapektahan sila.
That's an interesting point. Does knowing that you'll get feedback this way, so direct, so immediate, and sometimes anonymous, which is like the protective shield, does that influence how you write your stories?
Well, it makes you stand your ground. In that, I was never a breaking news reporter. That I was a lousy breaking news reporter because I would note down the color of the floor and have no idea what the decision was in court, that sort of thing. But I do opinion, and you know that you're going to get hit first. So you cover your ass every which way, and then when they hit you told me to be myself. Then when they hit you, you're ready. And you let them say whatever they want to say, and then sometimes it hurts, but you know you stood by it anyway. And if you're wrong, then you're wrong, and that's it. It's harder for me because I'm not the most sociable person out there. I hide behind cameras and notebooks, so I think it's harder for me than most of the reporters. So I just pretend I'm tweeting, and then it's good for Rappler.
Natasha?
Maria always encourages us to engage critics, just to respond to comments. Does it affect my stories knowing there are people? Definitely. I mean, just in the sense that you need to know that you can defend your opinion. I do opinion pieces as well, but at the same time, it's also I didn't realize how tough I was until I got into the industry. You just have to let it. You have to be really confident about yourself and just really be secure about who you are. Otherwise, you will break down. You will falter. There are malicious people out there, but I actually don't even recall. Not yet, at least. But okay, for instance, political reporting, right? The elections. if you cared so much about not stepping on anyone's toes, there'd be so many stories that would go beyond you, and you just, you owe it to the people to tell that story. So then you have no choice but to be tough, knowing you're going to hit this politician, get a lot of flack about it, possibly get a death threat from it, and you just kind of have to toughen up, accept it. It's part of the job.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like I've grown so much in the 2 years I've been in Rappler. Like, I didn't realize that I could, in high school, you care so much about what people think. And now, honestly...
You have a libel case. And there you go.
Like, I should probably be worried about like whether a warrant of arrest will come out. But really, I'm chilling.
What I'm getting is like, it builds a filter for how to do your work, but to pay attention to what to prioritize.
Actually, I don't think that's changed that much.
Yeah.
I think it's still, the core of journalism is still the same, with or without the technology. But I
Right.
think what it does is that immediate feedback forces you to be hyper vigilant.
Yes.
And I go back, the courage. I love the courage of the 20-somethings.
Yes.
You have to have that courage, and it's
Maria
part of
calls
what
it
trends.
courage. I call it recklessness. Which
Yeah.
There's a thin line.
What?
Is there a thin line between...
They seem to think I'm reckless, but they let me do my thing anyway, so that's fine.
That's courage.
She's a rebel with a cause.
No, my thing is, and I figured it out in High End, you gotta see it. You gotta push it, you gotta be there. You have to stand in front of the body and say, I can look at this. Because if I don't see it, how do I tell that story? And it's for ego also, because
Yeah.
if I don't have the balls for this, I have no right to be here. So that's what, every day I kept pushing it. At some point, I couldn't push anymore, and I said, okay, take me home now. But you better let me go back.
But can I tell you
Yes.
another positive? Rappler wouldn't have been possible without this. Without social media,
Yeah.
we would not exist today. We couldn't have existed 5 years ago. We started with 12 people. I mean, that's
12 people 2 years ago.
20% of our content comes from social media, comes from our viewers. It is crowdsourced. It is, that is an incredible thing, and it goes back to what Gigi said about being inspired. Yeah, I got to remember to be inspired by that, because that is also a wonderful change, and gathering that zeitgeist. That's part of Rappler's goal, to try to build institutions ground up and help people, because I think in the end the negatives are far outweighed by the positives.
Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit. We've been talking about then and now, journalism then and now. I'm going to shift a little bit to the personal side. Our viewers do want to get to know the women behind Rappler a little better this evening. And I'm going to start off with Gigi, because you're the woman in the middle of these two age groups. I'll join you there.
Thank you.
You're a mother of 3. You wrote a book on elections.
They are not related, as I said.
I won't ask you about the relationship between politics and motherhood, but how do you balance motherhood, family, work, your interests in local governance?
I won't pretend that I have a life-work balance. It's always like phases. Like at a certain point, I'm an ideal mom. Hindi lang ina, I call myself. And then there are times that I'm really just working, and the kids will be complaining.
Right.
I'm very thankful. Thank you for online work.
Yes.
I can stay at home when I need to, and yeah, I would not have continued as a journalist if there wasn't this. You can stay home at certain days and work online.
The flexibility that it offers
Yeah,
you.
remember that after Newsbreak, I quit full-time job for 2.5 years because I realized that, oh my God, my eldest is about to become a teenager, and I thought I didn't hug him enough, I didn't kiss him enough, and so they got used to me for 2.5 years, just staying at home and just going to Manila from time to time. And whenever I would, initially they were surprised, Mom, why are you here? Why are you every day? Mom, why are you here? I am not going to the office. And then when I went back to full-time work, they would say, Mom, why are you dressing up? Mom, why are you dressing up? Yeah, you really have to. And I think this is, Glenda is partly responsible for this. You teach the kids to be more independent when you're not always with them 24 hours. And yeah, they've become more responsible, more independent, and they have to understand the kind of work that I'm doing. my 6 years old, he was 5 a few months ago. He said, "Mommy, what is Comelec?" Because it was election time and I was always talking to people on the phone, and Rappler people were calling it elections. And they get to appreciate it. I'm happy that they're not affected by the fact that, people tend to say, "Oh, your mom is a journalist, your mom is with the Rappler." They're not affected by that.
Right.
It's for them. It's really work with some advocacy, work with passion, and for them this is just another mommy's work. Your mom could be an accountant or a lawyer or a teacher.
But I don't think they could bring the work home and be with their kids versus being an accountant, no? That's part of the
Of course,
perks.
some accountants bring
I'm going to shift to you, Maria. Gigi was talking about balancing motherhood and work, but you as a CEO and as a journalist, let's talk about that balance that you need to maintain.
I had training for it, in the sense that when I handle the news group, you make a distinction. My time, it is their time to be out in the field, and
Right.
my time at a certain point. And this was in 2005. I became a news manager, and you got to embrace it. It's not as much fun in many ways because you're, managing 1,000 journalists at that point was workflows. It was about efficiency. It was about trying to run a profit and loss center.
Right.
And in that job, I learned that you need to see how you're going to support great journalism, which is essential to society. And we did well. Glenda and I managed, Glenda, Gemma, and I were managers. Gigi was also part of this. Now with Rappler, what I love about Rappler is that as the journalists are doing something completely new,
Right.
redefining it, the business model is dead in journalism.
The business model is
The
dead.
business model is dead globally. And every news group is looking for a new one, and Rappler, I hope, has found it. Right? And that's part of that balance that I never want to stop being a journalist, but at the same time, I'm looking at how are we going to pay for our journalism?
Yes.
How are we going? Where's the profit and loss statement for this one? And with Rappler, the best part is technology again allows you different things. So the same model for content creation is the same model for our partners who are advertisers,
Right.
is the same model for our partners in Project Agos, which is a disaster risk, climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction platform. We have partners. It is, in my mind, a collaborative world in that sense. The journalists continue hard-hitting journalism,
Yes.
as hard-hitting as it gets, because there are no vested interests there. We have a group called Move PH,
Right.
which is civic engagement taken to the nth degree. You go beyond citizen journalism and you actually work to solve problems that I've been frustrated by for the last 30 years. I've done the same types of stories with the same themes. We can now try to help solve some of these with partners. And that's the best part of it. So if you say, what's the balance? It's very holistic.
Yes.
Where the balance goes is if I'm writing a story, there's certain, I write it as if I was a reporter. These are the things I get as a reporter. I now, running the business, know certain things, and some of it is under a non-disclosure agreement that I can't. So those things don't go into the story. I do the same way that I made the division when I was a corporate officer in a large news group and a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
The core is, I think, to be a good news manager, you need to have been a reporter. You need to love the news. You need to understand why the news is essential. You need to understand why society needs good journalists. And you need to help find and train and grow the next generation of journalists. And that is incredible. I think we're very lucky to have.
Do you miss being out on the field, Maria?
Always. But
That never goes away.
Oh my gosh. Which is why we push them so hard. Hi.
Right, that's
Journalists
right.
now should be thankful because during my time as a reporter, we were always frustrated about managers who were never journalists themselves.
Oh.
And we would always complain, they don't understand what journalists need. How are they running this media company when they're
Go a little
And
bit into
yet,
that, Gigi.
when senior journalists were being asked to do managerial jobs, they would, oh no, I'm a journalist, I'm editorial. And how can we have that management who knows what the journalists need. If the senior journalists wouldn't want to become managers, I think it has changed in the last several years, and we're thankful for that.
Go a little bit into not knowing what the journalists need. What does that need that was overlooked then that we can now address?
Simple little things like he would issue a check when it's an emergency coverage. You need to send the reporters, and then the accounting
It's
department. I mean, cash. We need to things like that, and
It's really the little things.
Little things
that
little
matter.
things that affect your story.
Oh yeah.
and how come the company car is bringing the manager to some meeting when the reporters and the photographers need to rush to a coverage? Things like that.
Reporters first.
I mean,
Yeah.
hindi alam yan ng managers if they never experience having to cover, the pressure of the deadline.
I think the hard part of a corporation is that the systems are normally set up by corporate officers. News is different. You need to blow up, and that's basically the work I did before Rappler, is taking corporate structures and turning them to be responsive news organizations.
Let's talk a little bit about social engagement, which is also another part of the core of Rappler. Maria Chai is now heading Rappler's investigative team. She couldn't join us tonight because she's sick, but we know she's watching. Chai, get well. But before she headed Rappler's social engagement arm, MOVE, let's talk about journalism and social engagement. Those things are two different things,
Used to be.
or used to be.
Yeah.
Where's the common ground now between straight reporting and advocacy?
I don't know what straight reporting is.
I think that in the end, we all became journalists because we wanted we see things. You have the courage to say to report what you see, and hope. Why do you do that? Because you want it to change. So the normal advocacy of a journalist is truth, transparency, right? You hold the public and the private sector accountable. Technology allows us to do much more than that now, and that's what MOVE does. MOVE actually bridges the gap between the public and the private sector and tries to take advocacies, and there are three that we have in Rappler right now that's front and center: disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, Project Agos, something that we did, #Budget Watch, which is in the end an anti-corruption campaign. And then the last one is we just launched this week, #Hunger Project,
Okay.
which is why has our GDP increased and yet incidents of hunger have not significantly decreased, and that's connected to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation as well. So that's the fun part with MOVE PH, is that you can collaborate now. That's something we journalists didn't do, but we can collaborate with the people who are actually working to solve the problem.
Okay. I see this collective age talk here, and how in different ways we're proud of it. We've been talking a lot about then and now, and during our time, your time, training future journalists. But, and the viewers out there might wonder, what is it like to be working in a newsroom where we have our generation and their generation, and they can actually come together? Is there a generation gap in the newsroom in Rappler? Or, the two girls are laughing there nervously. No.
No, not nervously, very amused. It's actually always a running joke, Miss Glenda, who's one of our desk editors as well, always says, tatanda rin kayo. Like, one day you're gonna get old as well. Because we always make fun of, especially when they need their glasses to read, the little things.
Right.
Or asking us what YOLO is.
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's really, it's amusing to us, obviously, and I understand when they were gonna get old, but that's another 25 years from now, it doesn't really matter. But I feel very privileged to be working with both people my age and people who are, older. And the relationship I have, I think, with my editors is very comfortable. It's also like, I think, the culture that we breed in the newsroom. Obviously we are of different ages, but it's very flat. It's very open. And that actually kind of takes away the age gap. Obviously there are different experiences, and we learn from each other. But we learn from each other because we're open. Because that age really is just a number, at least for us, but am I happy to be young?
Especially since we all know the meaning of YOLO. If you all know the meaning of YOLO.
What's YOLO, Marie? Ugh.
See?
You want to talk about this? Is there an age gap, Patricia?
There is, in that, but there will always be an age gap somewhere, someplace, you
Yes.
know, anywhere. But what's great about Rappler is it's comfortable, you know. There is great comfort. I'm glad for the age gap because I don't want to be sitting in a tent in Tacloban and not having faith on who's running my desk back in Manila. Because it's not so much the age, it's the
Experience.
wisdom of experience. Yes.
She sounded sarcastic.
The wisdom of experience with a lot of
You can take that
emphasis.
however way you want to take that. And you know, maybe I'm a little bit more reckless than I should be because I know they'll pull me back. They'll tell me what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. It took them forever to allow me to walk into Zamboanga because they think I'm going to walk under a mortar when I'm shooting slow motion.
Which could happen.
Yes,
Which could happen, right?
Which I nearly did. But that's the thing. There is so much value in looking at them, seeing where they've been and what they've become, and thinking, I can get there. It's possible. I might stay alive another 25 years, that sort of thing. And they tell the worst that you've gone through, they've gone through worse.
Yeah.
And then they'll tell you you'll get past this. They say, breathe one more week, you'll be fine. And I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get past that. And they go, just slow down and take it. And you can't question them because they're still there and they're still doing what they're doing. And we want to be doing what we're doing forever.
And they're actually, you know, there's the perspectives here that are, there's a sharing of different perspectives that you
Oh,
draw
yeah.
from the experience
You
of
should share
the
the
younger
CV.
people and the older people.
I'd like to think that they also learn from us.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure they do.
I mean, there's obviously value in having them having been on the field, you know, and being able to understand what we go through. But at the same time, we were just talking about it. It's different now, you know. Sometimes we joke about it. We're like, I wonder if they were here live tweeting and blogging and taking photos
yeah,
and
they
video
don't
and going
survive
live, you
that.
know.
We had
Right.
photographers with us.
To do it.
You know, there's that gap.
There's that.
There's that
They're
gap.
howling at us on the phone, where's this, where's that? Yeah, try rolling a 60 frame camera and then doing it at the same time and then trying to edit video while you're asking to break news.
No, you're trying to break news, but they're on the phone, but then you need to tweet with your phone. So
I need to put down the phone. That's
need to
pretty.
go.
Again, Rappler is unique because there are less than 10 of there are 5 or 6 of us above 40. And the rest are 20-somethings. And that is by design because the
What's
20-somethings,
that by design?
you guys are digital natives, right? Digital natives think differently.
Yeah.
So we figure out we've rolled some of this stuff
Yep.
out before, and 40-something journalists are kind of set in their ways, right? It's harder to adapt, not in a negative way. I'm just saying, having tried to do this in a large news group, it is harder for experienced journalists to adapt to new things than for kids. Sorry, for the 20-somethings who grew up with this, who automatically do this and do this faster, who think differently. We will figure out, okay, we want to do this. And then they'll come up with a workflow that we couldn't have figured out. And I think the magic of Rappler is that we recognize that, right? So this generation is unique. They're going to be working for people who know less about the great disruptive movement that's happening in our generation. Social media,
Right.
technology, they know it, it's embedded in their DNA, but they'll be working for bosses who don't know it as well, bosses who are used to doing things a particular way. And at least we're smart enough to recognize that
It's
like
humbling, huh?
It's like your relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
Come here, how does this work?
Yes, yes. And
Can you explain to me why did
And what you probably don't know, during our time, age was a little bit of a detriment. Oh, bata ka pa. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know any better. Right? But now you will call your kids. I will ask Natasha or somebody else in the newsroom, how do you do this? What does YOLO
that's
mean?
power that we didn't have when we were younger. Because for
Yes.
us, it was like, pay your dues, man.
Right.
Going up, and you got to go up the rank the normal way. You guys kind of bypassed that. But that's kind of cool.
But because I'm in the middle of these two generations.
Yes.
When I
We're
was a
also
reporter,
objective,
I
no?
was blessed to be in a newsroom where editors were starting to be open, more democratic. You could lobby for the kind of stories you want to pursue, the angle you want to use. It was the generation when you could already ask your editor, why did you change my angle? in a polite way, and then they would, can I not submit the quota stories for today because I want to pursue an in-depth for this week, and they would allow it. Basically, it's like that with Rappler now, but it's more the norm than during our generation. Pero may editors would tell you, ngayon nga, when there are new reporters, I would say, this is how you get to know your beat. You go to this office, you study this, and then this is where you look for stories. And Glenda would tell me, during our time, our editors would just throw us into whatever bin and then, learn from there.
There's that line again, during our time.
Yeah. But during my time when Glenda was my editor.
Yolanda was your editor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Hot damn.
Yeah.
Hot damn.
She was one of those editors who was trying the balance between guiding you to
Yes.
become better, but also not spoiling you so that you feel
Yeah, she does that.
very different.
Yeah, we're not spoiled.
No, I wouldn't
But
say we are.
what I like about the what you were saying earlier, that we skipped a step. We're doing what older journalists would have done before. I think it's also because so much is demanded, and not in a bad way.
Yes.
They get your story and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is unprofessional. They don't treat you like you're a kid. They say, you're a journalist. It doesn't matter how old you are. Why is there a jump cut in your video? Why is there something wrong here? Why didn't you get that interview? So I think the expectation is what sort of demands a little more from us, and we mostly are not allowed to say, I'm a 20-something, what would I do?
Yeah, I mean,
It's
but it
never an
works.
excuse now as well.
It works,
Yes.
But I
because
try
we're
anyway.
young. We have so much energy. Sorry, I'm not saying you guys don't, but I mean, we don't.
just got
we don't
there
have
in the
families.
background.
We don't have kids. We can meet the demands, basically. So, and we're willing to. So
Please
I think.
don't promise. I need to sleep now.
With a lot of people watching, we promise.
I just, I think it's great that they've given us the opportunity to be able to do what we're doing. To be able to send Pat, conflict zones at what 20? I'm not gonna say your age.
8.
Proud. There you go. 28. For me to be able to cover such national political stories and be on the campaign trail, 2 years in, is an opportunity I appreciate.
We've been talking a lot about how technology has made the job a little easier, faster, but tougher in that sense. Nonetheless, being a journalist is tough work. You're out in the combat zone. It's endless days. So, what are some of the sacrifices you've had to make for this job that you obviously all love?
Bathrooms. 5 days in Tacloban, there was no bathroom. Try being a girl there. For me, it's always the hardest thing, actually, being female in a field. Literally, it's very hard. And Maria and my other bosses will always give me advice on how to deal with.
What was the best piece of advice?
One of my concerns when we were sending a team to Tacloban is there are girls. What if their period catches up with them?
How that happened.
I have a response to that, but I'll tell you after. Okay. Yeah. What was one of the best pieces of advice that you got being out in the field? So, woman, no bathroom. Or is that something we're gonna say? Be creative.
You have to be pretty willing to pull down your pants in the middle of a field and do it. Number 1, not number 2. That's hard. No, that's not. What, you want to give me to give you a blow by blow of what I had to do? It was. You gotta be ready with everything, because in Tacloban there's nothing. There's really nothing. I mean, you can't get a pack of cigarettes for anything. You can't get underwear for anything. There's no food. There's nothing, which is why the desk was fantastic and shipping over so many things. But I guess my best advice is to just keep reminding yourself why you're there.
And the simple things that you kind of take for granted.
Comfort. You give up comfort.
You completely give up comfort. You're sleeping on a whiteboard, and it was bad. But you deal with mostly everything, because then you go back in the field and then you see how much worse it is for everyone else. You have no right to complain. You're alive, and a lot of them are not. So I think even if you give up the comfort, you realize you have a bigger responsibility to bear witness, I
I
guess.
don't want to look at it as making sacrifices as you do your job as a journalist, you wanted this. You wanted to
chose
be in
it.
this kind of job.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in you, there's a passion
Definitely.
to do this, to help,
Yeah.
to serve in whatever way. So nobody's complaining.
I don't actually think it's for me anyway, because everyone else is like, built a different way. But I'm not out there to serve or to help, or because I don't think we're changing the world or anything. I mean, irrelevant of what Maria would like you to believe.
Oh,
But
I don't believe the same thing.
it's okay. But I think we're there to see it, and then to say what we saw, and then do it the best way possible. Because if we don't, then it's like it never happened. You know?
Actually, that's still service. It's just not service the way people define service. The fact that you let them know what they have to know. The fact that you're telling their story so that people who need to know learn about their story. You're serving.
Actually, I think it's more than serving. I mean, I spent the bulk of my career as a war zone correspondent at a time when it wasn't so easy for women to break into a war zone, which
Yes.
means that, for example, I couldn't have said that I'm afraid of anything. I'm thinking of comforts. You just don't.
That's true.
And you go in and you do it, and you do it better than anyone else has done it.
Mhm.
And the reason you do it is because we were in Suwai in East Timor, we helped 200 people save their lives. Because you're able to broadcast a story of someone you help, it's you get help there faster. You shame people into helping if needed. You do what needs to get done, and that starts with telling a story. So that's where we do disagree. I do think the reason you do it is because you are able to mobilize. It's the stories themselves are an action, and it isn't just. I don't think about it as service. I think that's like a Filipino thing that we've gotten used to. It is what journalism is. It's why we became journalists. But then I think beyond that, if you do Warzone, but again, for me, those were the trade-offs. The last 5 years I was with CNN, I was in my apartment a total of 3 months every year.
Wow.
And it meant that my life there was no through line in my life. The through line was the airport. I had a favorite spot in the lounge, and I go there and they kept it for me. I became very good friends with the people in the lounge and in the airplanes that we were on. Now it doesn't have to be like that here, and I actually think I feel the impact of their stories immediately. And that's the one nice thing about coming back, because in CNN you throw something and it goes into a great black hole. Maybe in Pakistan, in India, in East Timor, we can see world reaction immediately for it. I know that our reporting in East Timor pushed the US and Australia to bring forces in sooner. We were the last people there, we were the first in again, and that made a difference. But here in the Philippines, every story they do, every story they come
I
back
still
with.
think it's a great black hole we're throwing our stories in.
I don't think so.
Which doesn't stop us from doing it.
No, you see immediate feedback. Immediate feedback, immediate action. Again, look at the cybercrime law. That came out of the stories you guys did, and the action on the web actually affected the real world. Million people march. Those were stories that you guys also did, amplified. So in that sense, I'm much more of an optimist. But Trisha plays at being a cynic, 25 or 28.
28.
She's not that much of a cynic. She only pretends at it.
No, I'm grateful for the trust to allow me to go places that they would prefer to go themselves. Because I actually know Maria desperately wanted to go to Haiyan. And by the time I was fighting not to come home. And I wrote a long letter to Maria. This is what we do. I copy-pasted from the newsroom, by the way, you didn't know that. But I told her we need to stay. Because international agencies are pulling out. There's barely there were very few wire reporters left. So I just said, this was the time we have to stay. And that was the worst week. That was the week where we were finding bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to stay until Tuesday. By Friday, I wanted to pull out. I wanted to go home so badly because I was getting nightmares and didn't know what to do. And I couldn't tell them. Because I was scared, if I tell them, they'll never let me come back. They'll say, this is not the sort of thing you're supposed to do. Stay in entertainment, do life in style or whatever, which I can do, but this is what I want to do, you know? And it was when I came back and I was talking to them, and then they said, this is okay. This is normal. You shouldn't be staying there 18 days, come back, go back again, that sort of thing. So I think the fact that they've been there makes it easier for us to go there.
We have a question from social media. We have from Eva at Phoenix Doth. You're aware for sure that the media influences views. What do you do about it in relation to the 2016 elections? I'm going to take a round, so from each of you. Gigi, do you want to start?
Just report on the elections the way we've always had. Report what's happening. Provide analysis that's not influenced by interest groups or political camps. Try to make sense of the news every day, give them perspective.
Right.
Definitely not be perceived as favoring one camp over the other. It's really not us forming their opinion. It's us giving them quality stories, because we trust the people who would be following the news on the elections are people who are smart enough to form their own opinion. They just want to be informed.
Okay. Natasha?
Stay incorruptible. Don't accept ever the first. I feel like, and I've learned this from them. Once you accept the first offer, it's downhill from there. And I think that once you have that, that you never will accept any sort of money, especially here in the Philippines when elections, obviously, it just means that there's a lot of paying, especially in media here in the Philippines. Knowing that we have that, and that we will never give that away, is enough. I think that alone is enough to influence your stories. So
I like that. Stay incorruptible. Patricia?
Stay on the story, I think. This is disaster country. I mean, it's Zamboanga, then Bohol, then Haiyan, and then there's going to be more, and we know that. And it's, as a journalist, you jump story to story, parachute in, you get out, and then you go on to the next story. I think, for me, the hardest is to stay with the story. Because Maguindanao was 4 years ago? And then there's so much more after. So I think what I need to do, or many of us need to do, is to remember, to keep telling the story all the way to 2016, so that the next person we elect will know that this is what matters and this is what has to change.
We should never forget. Maria?
Disasters are political. You know,
Disaster,
I
that's
mean,
true.
if you look at every single country around the world, and I'm not the first to say this, every government tries to manage disasters, tries to manage death counts, because there's always there's repercussion on the government if they're perceived as unable to actually take care of their own. Having said that, what is the key thing? I think Rapplers, this is by January, we will start our third year. So this is the end of our second year. And one of the things that Rappler has actually shown is that we have the courage to tell the truth, regardless of whose interests are at stake. We've challenged the government when it's not telling what we believe is the truth, and we've come up against this in Zamboanga. We believe there was a surrender that did happen.
Right.
It wasn't accepted
Yes.
by the government, but power has certain powers. You know, you can rationalize and create the world in your image with enough power. And our job is, regardless of how small we are, to stand up against it and say, yo, this is really what they're saying and this is really what happened, regardless of what attacks we may have. We have no vested interest. We're not connected to any political parties, institutions. That's the goal. Really and we take this very seriously because 2016 will be critically important to this country. It's going to be, again, another period of transition, but by that point, internet penetration rate will be high enough, large enough. Right now we're at 38%. The Secretary of DOST claims that by 2015 we'll have 99% internet penetration rate if they use TV white space. This means that the people, social media, will have a major role to play, And part of our role in that, I hope, is going to be to help educate people. And that's the cycle that we've seen. I don't think Filipinos understand that in the end, disaster management was a repercussion of the elections that happened. That all of these things is one continuum, and that we need to continue following it through. Our actions have repercussions.
Our decisions have repercussions. Political elections are related to disasters. And I love how you prefaced that whole message with a yo. Did you know?
Yeah, yo, Maria.
Yo.
Did I say that?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
We have another question from RJ de los Santos, 29s. Do you ladies feel the gender equality, in air quotes, gender equality here in our country, as in, all caps, equal?
Do we feel the gender equality or inequality?
Equality is what he wrote. Do you feel the gender
There's
equality? But it was in
gender
air quotes.
equality.
I think it's easiest now. I mean, I don't know about your generation, but I mean, I do not know about.
It's okay.
I'm not gonna try. Okay. Sorry. I don't feel it in the media. Not at all. The media is run by women. Every major news organization is headed by a woman. I have 5 female bosses, you know, so I don't feel the inequality at all. I feel not so much an advantage, but it's the same, it's what other industries hope for. And we have it. So inequality, no. Equality is very meritocratic in the media.
Excellent point.
I
Natasha.
agree that we're very privileged to be in an industry where I feel that women are equal. I work for all women. There are very few men in the newsroom, and I feel like women can absolutely compete in the media. But working in the media as women also exposes you to the issues that women do have that are not in media. I mean, the fact that it took so long for the RH bill to pass,
Yep.
I mean, that's only one of the many issues we still
Yeah,
have.
that's
And look at
very
the number
true.
of women leaders we have. We have 2 women senators out of how many? You know, we have 3. We have 3, you know. There are not enough women leaders, I feel.
Yeah.
So I think it's sometimes easy to forget that the problems
That's
are there
true.
because we're so lucky to be in an industry
That's true.
where we absolutely feel equal. But like,
You think it's sort of nuts because you're living in a situation
Yeah.
where it's so progressive. And then when you
In
go
many
out,
ways, yeah.
when you go out there, it's absolutely insane how the logic functions. I mean, you listen to the arguments of the High Court for
Yes.
the RH bill, and you think this is kind of. You think this is normal, and people buy into it. So you have to bring yourself to a point where, wait, this is where I work in the media. This is not normal.
right.
Everything else is normal. Let's try to shift it a little further, and this is a
Also being empowered as women in the media, because then we can use that to kind of help push women's issues, especially in areas that don't necessarily have the same voice that we have. So I think it's almost like a blessing, you know, it's almost a responsibility.
Yeah. Gigi?
Yeah, well, in my life, family, work, the inequality always tilted to my favor. So, never became a problem to me. But it empowers see segments of society who don't realize that they have to claim that right. Your role in the media is to push for the stories, the issues that would empower them. It's not automatic. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think you become more compassionate about their situation.
Right.
Why are you not pushing for this? You're the mother. You're the one taking care of the kids. Your husband just bring home the income, but who manages the budget, the household, everything. You have to make them realize they don't have to accept the inequality that they are in. And you cannot do that if you yourself don't feel empowered.
You have that choice to make, Maria.
They've said we are empowered in media. The
Yes.
news heads are mostly women in journalism, in the news groups. But I think, this we just recently commissioned a survey in the National Capital Region,
Yes.
and the end goal of that was to actually see what do people really think, and are the stereotypes still there? And they are. And so what we saw is that society is still ruled by its values.
Yes.
Those values will change with education, But here's my thing. The stats from that are still horrible. You know, men will still, in their families, men will still get the education. People still think if there's only one job left, the man should have
Yeah.
it, not the woman. Strangely, even though we've had 2 female presidents, they also think that men should be president, vice president, senate president, senator.
Positions of
that
power.
the positions of power still belong to the men, and that could be partly because of the way our female presidents did.
Were
I'm not sure, but
That's
it's
a
still
fair
well. Okay,
argument.
I'm just saying that that those are still there. Having said that, the 20-somethings live in a different world. And again, I go back to that internet penetration rate, because in their world, I was asking them about this. We were on our way somewhere, and I was like going, okay, so how did you grow up? And if you're if you grew up with this technology, how did it affect you? And our 20-somethings in the car, whoever's in the car with me is my total survey point. But you know, they came back and said, we grew up with a global view because they're connected. Those two, connected and global, which means automatically their values have shifted, and you can see it in the way 20-somethings think. You can feel it in UP. You know, so I'm waiting for the 20-somethings to actually come and take over, because our generation, we didn't do such a good job. I mean, we didn't break the stereotypes as much as we could have. Hopefully their generation does better than ours.
I'm going to disagree with that.
Go.
In that their generation broke enough stereotypes so we can be what
Yeah.
we want to be.
Yeah.
So
There's still a little bit that needs to be done, but sure, we've come a little. There's been progress.
14
that has
years
been
to
made.
pass the RH. I'm just saying.
But you know,
that
coming
was
from,
your fault.
we've been talking a lot about your generation, my generation. I'm the one sitting here in the middle. I will be the one to say that you don't look your age. You don't look your age at all. But no, we're still proud of it. Okay, we need to do a quick roundup now, ladies. And our final question for this evening is: what is your philosophy in life? Or I'll give you I won't make it so hard. I'll give you a choice. What are the main factors that affect your decisions as a journalist and as a person? That wasn't any easier?
You're me first?
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah. In whatever situation or place or task I find myself in, there's a reason I'm there. There's a purpose I'm there. I would just give my best. And somewhere before I turned 40, or I think when I turned 40, I shifted from the thinking that I have not achieved enough to...
You're past 40.
I've shifted from I've not achieved enough
Good
to
cue.
I have not served or given enough. I think it made a lot of difference in the perspective, how you do things, how you relate to people, and it eases pressure on you. It's easier when you just want to give instead of focusing. Yeah, it's really, I have a purpose wherever I am placed, and I'll give my best.
One word, what's your mood meter for 2014 given that?
Inspired.
Inspired. Pa rin. Okay. Natasha.
What guides my decisions? I was just telling Maria earlier before we started, I'd say passion. That's the reason why I came into this industry. It's what guides a lot of my decisions. As long as I'm happy with what I'm doing, I do it, and I will keep on doing it as long as I'm happy. But in journalism, I think there's very few things that should guide your decision. And really, for me, it's truth. And sometimes it's not. There are many times where I have wanted to see or write something else, but the truth is absolutely different.
Yeah.
But at that point, you don't really have a choice. You go with the truth. I like Maria. I see journalism as public service. It's really, and when you see it that way, then there's really only one thing that guides your articles and your stories, which is truth. But yeah, I just going back to my personal life, it's really passion, it's happiness. So I think that my life has completely changed since I turned into a journalist. For instance, I love sleep. That's had changed.
Is that one of the trade-offs?
That's one of the trade-offs. because I want to do things in my life that make me happy, and working out makes me happy, and the only way I can work out is if I wake up at 6 a.m. And you make the adjustments, I work out in the morning. I was never a morning person. You work all day because you love your work, and then I make it a point to make sure I see my friends at least once a week. There are things that I don't compromise, like my sister's wedding, like as much as I love my work, there are certain things that I will do. So things that make me happy, that's what guides my decision.
Patricia.
Not sure. This is the week Maria says I need to start to hinge my brain together again. But for me, it's always a story. What guides my decision, what guides my philosophy is my loyalty to whoever told me their story.
Yeah.
And because I don't do decision makers, I do the man on the street, the person affected. What guides me is, am I doing this justice? If I am here, I need to serve this person, this story. I'm not going to promise
So this
them.
service.
Ah, bullshit. Service is when you do it and something changes. I don't know if anything changes. I don't know if my craft is good enough.
have changed.
You kind of puncture that cynic button there.
Thank you, baby. Nice to know. Go save the world now.
I will.
But that's my thing. My only advantage is I want to see things. Or not so much, I don't want to see things. I'm willing to see things. I don't know what I have to prove, but I want to see things. So if I see it, I want people to imagine it as I see it. I guess that's my guiding principle. To see it and to show it exactly how it was, so that when you're not there, you know how they live, you know what hell they're going through, and you don't say, go fuck yourselves. I'm really sorry about my language.
Okay, Maria.
Good God, I don't know where to begin. I did miss my brother's wedding, and then till today, I was in a war zone. I couldn't get out, and if I had left, there wasn't even. I mean, you couldn't leave. There weren't any planes flying. So
Wow.
I did. There were lots of things. I'm the eldest here, and Wikipedia will tell you my age. So I might as well tell you. I mean, I'm 50 this year, and it's actually been a year that I thought a lot about. Each of the years. Your 20s are incredible because it's exploration, it's idealism, it's incredible energy, and you will change the world. Particularly you guys, because you're so smart. But 20s, 30s. 30s are when you start to settle down and you look at what you're choosing. You're starting to make your choice and you're getting better at it. You're putting in your 10,000 hours. 40s are absolute confidence. That's the time of confidence. You've done your 10,000 hours in many ways, and so you're reveling in that kind of mastery of yourself first. 50s, I think, is a time of reinvention, and this is part of what's fun about Rappler, right? I mean, we're reinventing lots of things. We're throwing everything at creative destruction. That was something else. When we were talking about in Budget Watch, we were talking about how the declaring PDAF unconstitutional is creative destruction, because it's throwing away a system that has been there since 1922 and replacing it with God knows what. We know we're going to stumble in this time period. Will it be better? We hope in the long run, but in the short term, it's going to be painful. And there are going to be no workflow processes, and there's going to be a lot that will go wrong. So I think that's part of, you ask, for me, the one thing, if I were to distill it, and this is going to be our team building theme because it's my theme, it goes back, excess within control. Like, I think excess within control, and it comes from a very weird movie. It's Somewhere in Time for the Romantics. Do you know that?
Oh, okay.
Diba? Jane Seymour and Clark.
A classic movie.
Yes.
Okay, again, here we are at our time. Different times.
You gotta watch it.
It's a classic.
You gotta watch it. Jane Seymour.
Ageless.
I think of him as Clark Kent, but what's his real name?
Christopher Reeve.
Christopher Reeve.
My
right.
time.
So she said, remember she was an actress, and she said, excess within control. That is how you create art. That's how you create your life. Excess is passion with discipline, control. Passion alone is self-indulgent. Control without passion is boring. Doesn't accomplish anything. And I think that's part of what I've tried to do is in my life is to try to find that balance. Because again, if you report a story and you've got no passion, you're disconnected from it, who cares?
Yes.
But
It'll come out in the story.
But just passion without discipline is not art. So that's what I think our challenge. If you ask me, that's our next challenge is how do we build an organization that actually can have that work the processes in place, the discipline, but yet be innovative by letting passion have these spaces which are completely unpredictable.
So in one word, Maria, mood meter for 2014.
I'm still afraid, but always optimistic. You know, I mean, inspired is still the right thing. I've been talking a lot in the last year about the power of technology, the power of the 20-somethings, and of course those smart 40-somethings and 50-somethings who recognize the power of the 20-somethings. It's a scary year because it is creative destruction in so many ways, in the Visayas, in our political system. And you know, PDAF, this #Million People March, the relationship of citizens to society, to governance, all of these things will be tested this year. Does that mean by throwing out PDAF, it's only 1%, but will that mean there will be less government spending, which will then mean that our GDP rate will be lower? There's all sorts of stuff that brings together. So I'm afraid of that, but at the same time, I would like wishful thinking. Please, government, give me more. You know, I would like to hope that we will come out of it better, and we have that hope as people. I'm with Gigi. It is inspiring, but I have faith in the people to hold governance, to hold government accountable, and I have faith in journalists to have the courage to actually call a spade a spade.
And there you have it. We have, on that note, hopeful, inspired. For tonight, we looked at the year in moods, the year in stages, the year is in ages. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Anna P. Santos for Rappler. Good evening.